the 5-second countdown? Okay, we're live. We're live.
We are live. Well, yes, man. I'm happy to be here talking with you. And for just want to jump in right away. I did mention this to Coffee just now, but from the outside looking in, I'm very very new to YouTube. My channel's about 5 minutes old, albeit growing pretty quickly. And you hear about the community and how everyone likes to help each other. And one of the first DMs I'd sent, I reached out to Coffee. I asked to set up a stream, and he jumped in, started helping me, giving me guidance on a lot of the equipment and a lot of the stuff that I need to get my ducks in a row for this channel. So, man, you are the epitome of this community, and I'm going to thank you again.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words, man. But it's really impressive what you've done in just about a month. For people that don't know, Ben here, he's already got monetization status. So try to catch up, boys and girls. 1.7K subs in 1 month and over 4,000 hours of watch time. Your videos are regularly getting 1.3K, 2.5K. They're in the thousands of views, and that's right off the bat. So if that's not just bullish in general for Hex, I don't know what is. I say this all the time, but there's divergence, right? The price is down, but the social metrics are up higher than they've ever been. This is a perfect example of that. But I also want to say, as a kind of just a tip for content creators, what I think you and I are doing right is quality over everything else, and just getting out there. And we were DMing earlier kind of about how you got started. And I was like, oh, wow, have you ever done YouTube before? Because it seems like this is not your first rodeo, but apparently it is. And so
thank you.
It just goes to show you,
feel that way.
Yeah, it's all about being persuasive, having a good tone of voice, being a good public speaker. And that's like 80% of it, right? The thumbnail, the catchy title, that's like 10%. And then maybe another 10% is buying yourself a nice microphone. And even like I tell people all the time, the video quality does not matter nearly as much as the microphone. When it comes to hardware,
right.
20% visual, 80% audio. A lot of people are listening to YouTube with the app closed. Or they're listening to it in their cars. They're driving around. And people overthink, whereas you just kind of hopped in the water and just started swimming. Like, that's all you have to do is just get out there and make content. Your first video is going to suck balls no matter what. It's going to be bad. Like, there's no way around that, but just consistency over time, not even like breaking your back. I think you're doing 2 or 3 videos a week. Well, you've been daily almost.
The first 2, I guess for about 2 weeks, I did almost 2 a day, just because I was, when you get those sudden trains of thought, and I've been trying to get back into 2023, start off on a healthier note. So often coming back from the gym, perhaps you're listening to something, a podcast, you get a little bit of clarity, and maybe then it's a good time to share some of those thoughts. So that's what I've been doing. And I haven't been thinking about it too much, to be honest with you. And it's been great learning from folks like yourself. Obviously before I got involved in YouTube, listening to your channel and some of the other folks who are playing around in this area. And it's been super useful. And it's definitely set the tone and set, a really good kind of narrative for anyone like myself coming in, who probably has a little bit more of a traditional background, let's say. But I think that what's resonating on my channel so far seems to be a bit of a unique lens that I'm looking through things, coming from a very much a finance background, coming from, a VC background. It's good to kind of apply some of those same rules to the way we look at crypto, the way we analyze kind of the stuff we want to get involved in.
I want to ask you about that for sure. My final tip on the YouTube rant is basically, again, what you're doing. Keep it simple, keep it short, sweet, and to the point. The live streams can be a bit longer. Yeah, they're more podcast style, and you understand that. But a lot of your videos are less than 10 minutes long, which is what the YouTube algorithm prefers, and it's what human beings prefer. If they want to hear an educational point or two, you're very direct, and you're talking about one central point for 5 to 10 minutes, and it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that, as long as you can articulate it well and put it succinctly. I'm scrolling through your videos, and they're all right about the optimal length that people want to hear, because we don't want to sit around all day and just listen to a circle jerk for 2 hours talking about, oh, the price can go up or down or sideways. Like, totally. There's no value in that, right?
I completely agree. And that was the same thought I had. I mean, and don't get me wrong, when it comes to YouTube algorithms, I'm still very green. But just thinking, I'm sure you're the same about the stuff that we like listening to and the stuff that actually, brings us value. And it's not necessarily sitting around speculating on the ups and the downs of what can happen. It's, if you have conviction and confidence about a particular thought, then share that thought, understanding that it's probably one of many, but it doesn't help anyone if you're going to sit on the fence with everyone else. So there are always going to be opposing views, but
Right. The moral of the story is be honest with yourself about, would you watch your own content? Like, do you think that your own videos are interesting enough to watch, or are you just talking to talk? It's nice to have somewhat of a point, somewhat of a mission. And I mean, we all really do have the same mission, right? Hex to the moon, financial freedom for everybody. It's all, yeah, right. And now has never been a better time to start making content. If you want to ride the next wave up, I mean, look at you, like 2K subs in less than a month, like pretty ideal time to start a channel. You know what I mean? That's gonna 10x or even 100x in the bull market, in my opinion. So it can become a full-time business. But getting off that, going back to full-time businesses. Speaking of that, you're a VC, which is unusual, and I think that's a really cool perspective. Are you in crypto mostly, or traditional equities, or?
No, and I'm actually not a VC full time now. So I have a bit of really a traditional. I'm not sure if you watched a previous video where I touched on this a little bit, but my background is about as straightforward and as traditional as you can get. I actually came out of law school. I ended up going into the stock market. I was trading at Merrill Lynch for a couple of years, and
Wow.
then I got so I had that kind of baptism of fire, if you will, into all things finance and
Yeah.
kind of how the trading lifestyle kind of exists. Then I ended up going over. First moved to the States. Got kind of, I guess, poached by a VC group in Cupertino over in Silicon Valley, which was great at the time because the whole VC environment that I was in was really based around almost like fringe technology. So it was around the same time that software as a service started becoming a thing. Where there was a business model in place where you're able to essentially build your own software. You're looking for investment on this because some of these guys are developers. They want to create a platform or a solution that folks can use at home and businesses can use, like a Salesforce type thing. And they needed help in, either giving them funds, acquiring them, helping them grow their footprint, expanding their sales, really kind of taking that and applying a lot of the business focus to it. And it was fantastic because it was very much based in and around innovation, around tech, a lot of things that I've always been passionate about. And it was a bit of a departure from traditional, trading and stocks, which all can be exciting, but it gets old fast, and it's a lot slower moving than crypto. But then after that, I ended up I now own a public relations firm, a marketing firm, and I do some other stuff too. I'm still somewhat involved in the VC world in terms of just my own personal investments, not necessarily on behalf of like other companies, but I have partners and things that we do look for the same types of opportunities for startups. A lot of incubator type stuff as well, which really helps keeping a pulse on all things really innovation tech. Crypto plays a huge part into that. And so yeah, it's been interesting, and my and not to bounce around too much, but the very motivation in myself, really getting a little bit more now involved in certainly publicizing a little bit more about the stuff I do in crypto was due to the fact that I've been, I guess, surrounded by or trying to learn from a lot of very successful people, right? And we use that word loosely, successful people, because they've been working their whole life. They're older gentlemen a lot of the time. Certainly in their late 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and it's unusual. We've all got friends from different walks of life, and seeing what so many people have been talking about, that transference of wealth. I've seen that take place right in front of me. Folks who I've been friends with for a long time who got involved in crypto. I mean, that was their kind of main thing, as it is a lot of people now. And then just seeing the difference in net worth, the difference in the opportunities afforded by these guys who I've been trying to learn from, who've been working in finance for years and years and years, huge financial institutions. They've done it all right. And then they are dwarfed by some of the much younger, much more successful now, certainly financially, people who have spent a fraction of the time just because they've realized that the revolution that we're in now, this
Yeah.
crypto kind of system is providing an atmosphere and an environment to make money that we may never see, like again, and certainly to the same extent.
This could be a once in a lifetime opportunity. Granted, it has lasted a decade, and I do think it's got another decade left in it, but it's for the people willing to take the risk. And, like you, I also used to work at a finance company, and I've seen that way of thinking, and it's a bit calcified, right? People can get stuck in their ways and be afraid to take risk. I mean, they'll take tons of risk when it comes to, different equity strategies, options trading, and all this crazy, derivatives in the financial markets. But when it comes to an entirely new paradigm, I know a bunch of people finance bros that I went to college with or that were currently working in finance at my old company, even today, that just write off crypto like it's a joke, or, oh man, it just crashed 90%.
It's the best thing though, right?
Yeah, which
it's
is
amazing
great
to hear that. Yeah.
for the people that are willing to take that jump. I mean, we are rewarded way asymmetrically, right? We have way outsized rewards, and the risk is what? Oh, it doesn't work out. You have to go back to your white collar finance job. Okay, that's all right.
Right.
I'll go back to making 200K a year instead of 2 million. But
that's totally it.
yeah,
And
I mean,
you
it's
know
just,
what? It astounds me, and it's so funny. I even like very recently, and again, but I'm sure it's the same with everyone who wants to build their network a little bit. It's always interesting to speak with new people. We'll learn about different types of business, and so I've tried again. Part of my 2023 kind of push for health. I've tried to play a little bit of tennis just to get myself moving around, and some of the guys I play tennis with, and again, these guys are finance guys. Some of them real stuck in their ways because they've been in finance for years and years. For all intents and purposes, they have done it. They're successful. When you sit down and you hear them talking about how crypto is a scam and how it's going to die a death soon, even explaining to them, these are folks who understand the or should understand the institutional interest and the engagement and the interaction that more and more of like our corporate infrastructure is getting involved in. These are guys who should understand that, but yet they still have that disconnect. They still have the inability to kind of piece those two things together, and they're going to lose out for it,
It reminds me of something I retweeted the other day, and there's no shortage of educated derelicts, right? It's part of the quote from Calvin Coolidge, right? Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence, certainly not education. And so you get in this academic trap, which a lot of people fall into, including what I retweeted the other day, a Nobel Prize winning economist, right, with all their models that are always wrong, talking about the internet, saying, I'm positive but that by 2005, the internet will go the way of the fax machine. And he said that in 1998. Dude looks like a dumbass right about now. And it's betting against crypto is like betting against the internet. The internet democratized information, just like cryptocurrency is democratizing value transfer. It's the next stage in the evolution of humanity as a whole. Whether you like it or not, whether you think somebody said this once, I think it might have been Trace Mayer, that it's a global digital revolution disguised as an internet Ponzi scheme. And it does look like that from the outside, but when you're in it, you realize what we're really doing. We're building a parallel financial system that is replacing all the middlemen and giving access to opportunities that before you would have to go, play the game and play that white collar game of clawing your way up the corporate ladder to, at a big, hedge fund or investment firm working. I know, I'm sure you remember the 80-hour weeks at an investment bank.
It was horrible. Right? It was horrible. It was exciting at the time just because it was new, but it gets old fast. And it's 100 miles an hour with an environment that doesn't move anywhere near as quickly as crypto does. But you still have to put the energy and the effort in for, essentially, in hindsight, certainly what looks like to a lot of us now who are more heavily involved in crypto, not enough reward for that, right? But yeah, and you're absolutely right. I think working your way up in the traditional sense is, I did it for so many years, and I consider myself lucky. I was offered opportunities and almost kind of leapfrogged my way through that system, and still it was a slog. And still, I know people a lot more successful than me because they were a little bit quicker to pick up, on the crypto realm. And
I think you're here at the right time, bro. I think you actually the bottom of the bear market is a pretty good time to get in, if you ask me. And who knows? Do you think we've hit the bottom, or what are your thoughts on that?
I do, honestly. Yeah, I think it's funny because obviously the narrative changes pretty frequently in terms of, are we at the bottom? And it's certainly when we're talking about the Richard Hart ecosystem and the little hype cycle that we could call the big hype cycle, that how that could play out. And I think that we right now, I mean, as much as I want to put some stock in Richard Hart's 11K and pray kind of mentality, he doesn't have to be dead on the money for his ethos to still be completely correct, right? So I'm not necessarily waiting for that massive drop in Bitcoin, but I'm also not invested in Bitcoin. I'm not, I think there is somewhat of a decorrelation between Bitcoin now and the rest of the market. It's not as much as perhaps there is between, what a Hex will do right now. I think with this hype cycle, that's completely decorrelated in my mind. But I think that Bitcoin is no longer necessary to lead the charge at all times. I think that when the halving takes place, it's still the center of these cycles, and it's great because we can read those cycles and the writing is on the wall. The blueprint's there for anyone who wants to make money and get involved now. It's very easy to do it if you play by the rules that have been laid out. But I think that right now, I think we're probably at or near the bottom, in my opinion. it certainly makes sense looking on paper. And I
We're
think
definitely
that,
closer to the bottom than we are from the top, if that makes
of
sense.
course, right? The
Right?
risk reward ratio now is so
Yeah.
much in your favor if you're getting involved in any kind of crypto right now. You're buying it, even if we undergo a couple more dips down, it's only a matter of time, providing the time horizon is long enough. And it doesn't have to be super long. I'm talking, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. I mean, these are time frames that could significantly, outweigh any short-term drops that we see. So I think that, and it's funny because a lot of folks will ask me the same thing. Is now a good time? Like, yes, it's a fantastic time now, but
Yeah.
you can wait and see for that that any more drops come in the market, but you have a very good chance of price running away from you.
Yep. And it's good not to chase the hype. It's good to pack your bags before the train leaves the station. Yeah, I know Hex went from 3 cents to 5 cents, but crypto can double up in a week or a weekend, and it
We
really
just
can
saw
go
it.
like we just saw. Yeah, and that's just the power of having a relatively low liquidity, retail friendly game that hasn't been infiltrated by Wall Street and all that. A lot of people seem to have the wrong idea about crypto as well. When people are hesitating or speaking negatively on crypto, I think they have the wrong idea about wealth generation in general, and that wealth creation is a positive sum game, whereas things like trading, that's a zero sum game. And there are actually negative sum games out there like blatant scams and rug pulls, which are rampant in cryptocurrency. Don't get me wrong. It's not a perfect place. It brings a lot of evil, nefarious people to the game, but you have to filter through and find the diamonds in the rough. And people don't realize that with enough wealth creation, when we make the pie bigger for everybody, you're not chasing a bigger slice of a pie that stays the same size. You can have the same percentage of coins, you can have the same slice of your pie, tell more people about it, and then if everybody has a long enough time scale, everybody really can win. The only people that lose are the people that couldn't delay gratification for a couple of years. They wanted the instant gratification. Maybe they were a victim of our throwaway culture. I really do believe that if we fix the money, we can fix people's psychology and kind of teach people to value longer term assets more. That's why you see so many winners in Hex, because they were able to change their mentality. And the losers crying, they've either gone away or they're angry just because they bought high and sold low at the end of the day.
So many great points there, and yet you're absolutely right. I mean, just in terms of having that delayed gratification, that's a dynamic that really Richard Hart kind of brought to the table and framed it in a way that made sense to certainly a lot of us who were involved in the ecosystem. But I have an interesting story about this, and it's something that I did share on one of my videos very, very briefly, but really epitomizes the importance of having a longer term mindset and delaying your gratification. So much like a lot of people, right? I got involved in crypto back when Ethereum came out. If I could have been an OG if I had just held on, but at
Yeah.
the time, it's a leap of faith. It was even a lot more speculative, a lot more of a kind of an industry in its infancy. And so, I ended up getting into Ethereum and sold out really prematurely. I'm talking like I doubled my money and I was super pumped. And then by the time the next cycle rolled around, and I wasn't as in tune with, I don't think anyone was truly in tune with like how the cycles worked at that point. We'd only really had one.
Yeah.
But now what we would consider to be the wrong time to start getting excited. At the top,
Yeah.
I made the decision to kind of cut out the middleman. I thought I'd outsmart the market a little bit and invest in a cryptocurrency farm. So in a country that shan't be named, my wife had her family owned some like warehouses and stuff that weren't really doing anything. So I spent a lot of money bringing machines over from China, placing the orders, these mining machines. It was mining, Bitcoin and Ethereum and whatnot.
Wow.
Um, Big lot of machines that came over there, set them all up, and when they know what they're doing, right? You're buying these mining machines. I had no experience in this. I just kind of, I've always had a very high risk tolerance, so I figured it'd be a good move for me. By the time we actually got them sent there, all of them kind of put together and set up and all of that stuff, 6 months had gone by. Well, by that time, and the reason we set up out there was just so the electricity cost was outweighed by, the potential profits. But 6 months have gone by, 7 months have gone by. The machines now are not kind of being as effective in their algorithms as perhaps they would have been, because there's a new model coming out soon, and the mining itself is getting more difficult, so they're less profitable than when I bought them. Then as soon as it started making money, and it wasn't anywhere near what I thought it would be, just because unless you're in that world and you're able to upgrade and kind of as you go, it's probably best left to the miners. This is kind of obviously pre-proof of stake. And
Yeah.
so by the time this all went through, the government of that country actually took away all the machines, and it was awful. But I calculated at the time, since then, and again, this is all in hindsight, just what would have happened should I have spent that same money, a fraction of that money, into the coins that I was mining and just held them. It would have been hundreds, if not thousands of times more money than going down through those shenanigans and trying to kind of outsmart the market. And obviously those lessons can be applied to pretty much any trading mentality too. I've lost money in various projects that I was uneducated really in terms of what made a good investment, still kind of finding the way. You read a white paper, you think, oh, that looks interesting. This is all cycles ago, but the
Yeah.
same rules apply. A lot of people losing a lot of money, and they're the people who, unfortunately, a lot of the new folks correlate, that whole scam term with crypto, because that's not the projects that you should be investing in to begin with. So I have had a roller coaster ride, but I'm happy to say that I've definitely learned my lessons, if not the hard way. And
I mean,
yeah,
yeah, you're an early miner. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's pretty OG when it comes to the crypto space, especially because we're all proof of stake now. There's going to be a day where mining is just a relic of the past. We're going to look at that as like, wow, you were a miner, you were wasting electricity. Oh God.
yeah.
But I don't know
So
what country you were in. It sounds like it could have been Iran, but I don't want to play guessing games.
no, no, it was down in Latin America.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, you have jurisdictional risk. Governments ban it and unban it all the time. Look at China. It's not like they can stop crypto, but right now the U.S. is the new powerhouse for mining just because of all the laws and regulations going on. But yeah, oftentimes, look, I do know people that have made money with mining. It is possible. I know people that have gone in just at the right time, but it really is just about market timing as well. Because you started mining at the top of the cycle, yeah, it's gonna be rough, and especially learning the hard way. You're coming into an industry full of sharks, basically, they've always got the latest gear. They've always got connections directly with the overseas distributors, and you're just a little, small fish coming in here trying to make a name for yourself. It's not going to be a smooth ride. It's going to probably
all things I wish I knew at the time.
yeah, and
But
I think
you're
that's great
absolutely right.
advice though, because just buy the damn coins and sit on your ass, and nine times out of 10, you're way better off unless you're extremely tech savvy and you understand the relationships you need with vendors, the jurisdictional risks, where to get cheap electricity, how to cool your machines efficiently. Now, luckily, none of that really matters. We've got PulseChain, we've got Ethereum that are proof of stake that don't use any mining at all. And I still see people getting hung up on like, oh, should I be a validator? Should I buy this validating hardware? And it's like, dude, if you want to like play around as a hobby, sure, but I can almost guarantee, none of this is a guarantee, but you're going to waste a lot of time, finicking around with your little validator box. And especially if you haven't ever learned command line or any of these tools that you need to know,
Right.
You're going to waste a lot of time and spin your wheels. Take it from me. I tried running nodes for every proof of stake protocol that I could, or anything that was CPU friendly back in 2017, 2016, Zcash, I ran Ethereum nodes. The coins that you make are not, the juice ain't worth the squeeze, so to speak. And you just end up, yes, I'm grateful that I learned about all these technical things, but I'm going to leave the validators to the smart validator dudes. And it's not really worth it. If I'm also not fully convinced that PulseChain is going to be profitable. We're going to find out when V3 testnet comes out. That'll be very interesting to keep an eye on. And if it is valuable, if V3 shows that PulseChain staking is worth it, yeah, I'll just buy one of those pre-made boxes that Alex from Hedron is making. Pay $1,000, plug it in, we're ready to go. I'm not going to waste my time anymore. I'm sure you're feeling the same way. I'm not going to waste my time Googling everything just for peanuts at the end of the day, when really the price appreciation is all that matters. Sitting on your ass, or even better yet, telling more people about it, that inflates the value of your bag way more than messing with wires and shit.
And so many interesting things there, and that's really interesting. I've never been involved in any kind of validator stuff, but I was scared off from my first kind of rabbit hole. But it's interesting what you say about kind of word of mouth and all of that stuff, and that's really one of the things I noticed coming from the VC space, for instance, where a lot of the time, especially for newer projects, and we've all seen it on Shark Tank, where someone will sit down, they'll have a project or something that they have, a product, and one of the first questions is, how long have you been around and what revenue are you driving right now? Well, sometimes, especially for the real innovation that hasn't really kind of come to fruition in any way, shape, or form, you don't have those data points to pull from. So the only thing you can look at are some of the other dynamics, the potential community around it, other ways to really kind of enforce that brand footprint. And so one of the things that really drew me to Hex was kind of looking through the lens I would when looking at kind of new projects to invest in, and seeing that so many of those boxes are checked. Plus, now with Hex at this point, not only is it great timing market wise, we also have a rich history of price performance to basically plot the course forward, whether that be P Hex or E Hex. And so, one of the things that attracted me to this ecosystem, aside from all of the stuff that Richard Hart's done, which I think whether you agree with his marketing tactics or not, it's been effective. But I think that like the community in itself, and you're a perfect example of that. I messaged you out of the blue really, and you were the most helpful person I could have possibly come across. And I think that speaks volumes for the community. And there is somewhat of a cult following, and it's not a bad thing. A culture. It's something that every
Right.
brand should have, right? And we used to do that. We used to look for that, especially if one of the first go-tos as a VC looking to expand a business was retention is everything for both customers and employees. And so
There's no better retention than 7 years, right?
oh, exactly, yeah, we would look in, and part of our mentality was we'll teach a company how to expand in the right way. We'll help them develop their own work culture, let's say, and create that cult following. And that's every company who Google do it, Apple do it, right? It's all about making people happy, making people a community that thrives through whatever various means you can. And
Have you
Hex is
ever
doing
have you ever dealt with a company that partially derives their culture off of controversy like Hex does? I mean, it seems to work, but has anything happened in your experience?
For me, I'll be honest with you, not so much, and I'll tell you why. I think that the time I was more heavily involved in the VC world, it wasn't that environment. I think that when social media started becoming a lot more prevalent, which hasn't really been that long, but you'll see like tweets from Wendy's or whatnot, and they're kind of picking arguments with
Yeah.
McDonald's, or it's really fun, and that's a culture that I think that has been really thriving through social vehicles and
Mhm.
platforms. And when I was kind of full time into that, those things didn't necessarily come into play quite as much. They were kind of just about starting out, with certainly not. I think Twitter was around then, but some of these other new kind of platforms that have come out since then, outside of Facebook and whatnot, it was kind of a different dynamic. Social media was used for a different thing, and I think that played such a heavy role. Has done, certainly with turning that environment in a positive way and presenting it, a lot differently to us. It's great to see, but I've never had anyone go through that path before. But you see it all the time, and Hex seems to be
Yeah.
doing very well from it.
Yeah, it seems to work for the individual level a lot more with, Conor McGregor, Jake Paul, Andrew Tate, all these guys that lean into it, whether that's good or bad, but their message at the end of the day is really what matters. And it's up to the end viewer, consumer to decide for themselves. And a lot of people seem to come into the Hex community with, thinking it's already a scam, wanting it to be a scam, and then maybe being open-minded enough to realize, wait, these guys don't seem like scammers. They seem like pretty normal, regular dudes. Even Richard Hart, it's
Well,
like, yeah, Richard Hart can be a little distasteful at times, but what did he really do at the end of the day? He wore outrageous clothing, like he wore stupid clothes, and now everyone's angry. Like, what are you really angry about? There's a guy wearing stupid clothes to get attention. What did he really say? I mean,
I have a take on that too.
go ahead.
It's super interesting because a lot of folks seem to be a little bit more concerned about that presentation of the brand, right? And my argument to that is, I talk to people who represent institutions all the time. The folks that you're worried about being offended by that are not the folks watching that content. The institutions that recognize the tokenomics and the opportunity at hand, they're the ones that are a little bit more kind of early adopting mentality that will look past that anyway. So I think that this is aimed at the consumer at the end of the day. And I think that, whilst, Richard Hart, Andrew Tate, Logan Paul, they all have different dynamics. It's still accomplishing a net positive at the end of the day. I'm sure as these cycles go forward and perhaps, Hex and PulseChain take on, perhaps more of a tenured approach. They've been, maybe they'll be staples, and I think they will be staples of the market going forward. I think then perhaps is more, it would make sense to start appealing more to like kind of more of a formal audience, more of
Yeah.
that traditional institutional heads. But right now, they're not the folks who are going to get involved in this anyway. You're really going to have to go some if you want to, not even Charles Hoskinson is doing that. And he's not exactly the most charismatic man in the world. He, for all intents and purposes, is like, kind of positioning himself that way. And
Yeah.
I don't think it's something we need to worry about.
Yeah, I say just get in while it's still retail friendly. You don't want to be buying when it's at the Bitcoin level of its S curve, when the institutions have already corrupted it, and you're basically buying Bitcoin from the very middlemen that crypto is invented to remove. Hex is still very, very retail friendly, low liquidity. It's for the people. It's somewhat of an IQ test, right? For the people that can see beyond the flashy exterior of us, which I really think it derives from being honest about everything at the end of the day. Yes, there's centralized ownership. There's centralized ownership in every crypto that's worth anything. There's centralized ownership in every asset in the real world, right? Yes, it's about getting money, right? Getting money and financial freedom and helping the world go hand in hand. You can't do anything to help the world if you're not rich, or, people don't like that word. People are allergic to this. They think money is bad or being wealthy is bad, but that's because they don't have any money. And a lot of the people that are running our government, they're using it and exercising their power very poorly. But this is a revolution that I think a lot of good things can come from. It's one of the only good things happening in the world, where when we give, the everyday person the same level of power, and that, is usually reserved for politicians and people in the oligarchy of, corporations and corporate America, all that. You'll find that they typically want to change the way things are, because they had to live through all the BS that, the oil companies and the military industrial complex were kind of forcing upon them. And you're ushering in this new generation of people that are thinking differently, that they need a little bit of cash to achieve their dreams. Let's be honest. So I've never seen a community that's more transparent about, yes, we're here to make money. No, that's not a bad thing. Yes, there's centralized ownership. Yes, the founder dresses like a clown. What's the problem? What's the problem here?
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, and it's interesting. You're talking about kind of centralization. I'd be interested to hear your take on, there's the SEC shenanigans taking place right now, right, with Kraken and what they've just done with Gemini.
Yeah.
And it, my take really is that, this all plays into a very strong positive narrative for Hex and the Richard Heart ecosystem going forward. We're the OGs of decentralization, and more people who were once coming online and typing in Hex and seeing the word scam, they're going to be typing in Hex and seeing the word decentralization. And that's going to be so much more of a powerful buzzword for them, because they're going to continue to be stung by, the Krakens, by the Geminis, by, by all of this stuff that's taking place, and just the importance of having autonomy, security, being isolated from the bad decision makers that, from these platforms that you don't have control over. They're making decisions outside of your orbit. So,
here's kind of the thing about Kraken and what the SEC did to them. They charged Kraken, for those that don't know, the SEC basically slapped Kraken on the wrist. They had to pay a $30 million fine and get rid of their staking service. Now, is this good or bad? Obviously, it's somewhere in between. It's nuanced. I'm not saying you should ever trust the SEC. I'm not saying they have anybody's best interest in mind or that they actually get anything productive done. But in this particular case, I will say that Kraken was kind of haphazardly going about their business. They were kind of basically just jotting everything down on spreadsheets and paying people arbitrarily. They weren't really, and that's because, for the most part, they got in trouble because they didn't disclose the methods in which they were distributing funds and stuff. And to a degree, that is their fault. They were doing it a little bit off the cuff, not really. And it was fine. It worked for people. They didn't lose anybody's money. But the SEC, let's be honest, they fucked up big by letting FTX get through. And it looks really bad for them. And so now they're going to try to get any quick wins that they can by over-investigating everybody and everything. And they found this little flaw in Kraken, which wasn't the end of the world. But yeah, Kraken was probably not doing it right. And so, great, they don't have staking as a service anymore. But you don't want that anyway. You should never be putting your money into those staking as a service things anyway, because why would you want to hand over your money and basically just trust somebody that they're going to do staking right for you, when you can do staking from your very own self-custodied wallet? I mean, not your keys, not your coins. We even heard Gary Gensler say, not your keys, not your coins. And I wouldn't trust the man for, if my life depended on it. But he said something right. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. And so this will actually end up, I'm always an optimist. I think this is going to end up with people furthering their distrust in centralized entities, which is good, because crypto doesn't really need that. Other than on and off ramps, we don't need centralized entities, and you shouldn't be using them for staking when you've got products like Hex that you can earn 20% APY on just by holding your own keys and locking it through a smart contract. There's no middleman, there's no company, nobody's paying the rewards. It's simply dictated by inflation of the coin.
Yeah,
So,
I totally agree. And selfishly speaking, I think it'll do wonders for this whole ecosystem. It's going to inject a lot more economic energy, a lot more trust into this whole kind of decentralized system, because people don't understand what it is, especially the folks who are newer to crypto, coming in for the first time and wanting to buy Bitcoin and Ethereum on Coinbase, and kind of just that's their only introduction to the market. So I think the more the media picks it up and the more they run with that kind of decentralized risk, or the centralization risk, I think that's definitely going to play a role. It is interesting that the government seems to be cracking down on centralization, right? I mean, I saw a couple of tweets. I think Walrus mentioned it too, that on paper, it is a little bit interesting that the SEC seem to be vying away from that centralization of staking, as opposed to kind of harnessing it. But I do think that they probably have an end goal in mind, in terms of maybe it was a slightly easier foot in the door to start bringing in some extra control there, or maybe they would prefer that staking kind of environment to take place on some of the institutional banks or finance houses that are already playing that to that tune. I think that it's going to be very interesting how these things play out going forward. But I think just very simple level, as a bit of an overview for anyone thinking about how this will interact with Hex, and how we should see that kind of in price performance, I think it can only be a good thing. I mean, I don't know if it's going to scare people away from crypto, maybe temporarily. Like we just saw a dip that was, I think we all knew that it was a 5-second dip. We may see some more of those, but ultimately, I think this whole narrative around the unique selling points of this Hex ecosystem, it's going to be very powerful, and be more powerful as time goes on.
yeah. Well, and also just to clarify my point too, I'm not ever in favor of more regulation. I mean, I do not look for some 3-letter agency to have my best interest at heart. And, oh, please, daddy, SEC, help me not get scammed. It's like, no, it's up to the user at the end of the day to educate themselves to the point where they're not going to get scammed. And this one particular time, the SEC's actions happen to align with, my values as well.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you should ever look for more regulation. You should look for more education. And that's what we're doing right now. And really, at the end of the day, I believe in ultimate self-sovereignty. And that's what crypto allows you to do if you do it right. We're the ones out here trying to teach people to do it right. We shouldn't be guided by some agency that, gets it wrong 9 times out of 10. They missed Voyager. They missed 3 Arrows Capital. They missed Celsius. They missed BlockFi. They missed FTX. Oh, but now they're going to go after a Hex YouTuber, for a random goose chase investigation, like a witch hunt, so to speak, and where there's nothing happening at all. It's just wasting everybody's time and money and legal fees, quite frankly.
Very well said. No, I totally agree with that too. And I think that, there's no doubt going to be more control coming down the pike. I mean, we've been saying that for a long time now, and I do think that these things tend to take their time rolling out. I don't think anyone's quite got a handle on how to do this correctly. So I think we do have a little bit of time in it, but it probably comes, and hopefully when it comes, it's as much of a soft landing on that as we could possibly get. Because if they come in with some control that ultimately brings some security, fine. I hope that's good for everyone. But we got to be careful that we're not going back to the older indoctrination that kind of keeps you in your box and controls your ability to grow financially. Because right now we're not stuck in that box at all.
It's like people have this innate desire for somebody else to handle things for them because they don't want to take personal self-responsibility. And we go into these waves and cycles of centralized power, and we kind of peaked in the centralized power, in maybe like the 50s, 60s, 70s. Ever since then, we've been slowly with the dawn of the internet, and now with the cryptocurrency revolution, we're going back to decentralized power, or we're realizing that we overshot it. And at some point, the people that we put in power to regulate things, that they transform into just simply wanting to keep themselves alive. They're like an organism that just wants to live. They lose the plot, and they stop caring about the initial purpose that they were intended for in the first place. The SEC was meant to protect investors. They haven't done shit for anybody until after the fact. And then they put on a front, and they have this one little cherry-picked case of Bitslotto. They'll have these very specific little things that they do to say, look, we're keeping investors safe. I don't know anybody that used Bitslotto. I don't know
Me
anybody.
either. No,
And it's
no,
like,
nobody.
oh, you saved like a couple $1 million in Russian money laundering. That's cool, guys. Like, good job. But you're not saving the American public. So, I mean, I can go on and on, but I'm kind of hoping what happens with, optimistically, what's happening is, from what I hear, Gary Gensler is going to be under a lot of heat for having closed door deals with Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX and totally ignoring what was best, trying to essentially make the exchange business a monopoly between like four major exchanges and excluding Binance and any other competition. So he's on the chopping block, I hope. And I'm hoping that also that kind of frenzy that's going on over, like I do know this for a fact. Ben Armstrong tweeted the other day that there's some legal ramifications investigating the SEC and asking for or demanding in court that they share all documents related to communications with FTX. Kind of like they're demanding all Hexicans share communications with Richard Hart, even though none of us have any. Well, I guarantee you the FTX SEC email thread sounds a lot more interesting. Sounds a lot more like they're going to find something there. And if Gary gets fired, if there's a restructuring of power, the one good thing, the one silver lining about government and government agencies is that they spin their wheels so much.
They're slow moving.
They're slow moving because, and the less that gets done is actually better. So where everyone's fighting over definitions and who's going to be in charge and who are we going after, we're just slowly, quietly innovating. And I'm hoping by that time, by the time the dust settles with the SEC, that PulseChain comes out and maybe investigations get dropped for Hex altogether without us having to do anything else. But obviously as a fail-safe, we do have a legal fund counteracting the investigation and saying, hey, this is a waste of everyone's time. We need a declarative statement from you to say Hex is not a security and it's outside of our jurisdiction, because it's very easy. I mean, with all the facts and all the right lawyers in place, it seems like it'd be very clear cut to get that definition of Hex not being a security. And then the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, has nothing to do with it. But in the meantime, we're just in limbo, right? We're just in limbo where they're trying to intimidate YouTubers, just every Joe Schmoes off the street that want to talk about a coin they like, a cryptocurrency that they like. And it's like,
it's hilarious, isn't it?
Also, don't you think if Richard was paying people to promote Hex, don't you think he'd start with, people with 1 million subscribers, not just little tiny channels with 2,000 subs, 5,000 subs, organically, pretty obviously organically started. If you,
and
you
he's
go
been
back
pretty
to
open. He's been pretty open and direct about doing quite the opposite. I mean, I don't know if he goes above and beyond sometimes to kind of just dismiss that whole thing. So I mean, it's kind of a bit of a witch hunt for no end in sight, I don't think.
Yeah, he's never paid anybody.
Well, that's interesting. So I mean, with the SEC and all of those shenanigans taking place, I mean, aside from that, I'd love to and I'm sure a lot of people here listening would love to hear kind of our thoughts on how we think this next few months and years is going to play out as the rest of this ecosystem comes to fruition. I know it's often a topic that's touched on by a lot of people, but I do think the narrative seems to change. Sometimes without real reason behind it. I mean, we all know that we're looking at the fundamentals of this thing, and it looks like it's about to rock and roll. But I'm always interested to take a temperature read and see what the mindset is with everyone else. I mean, do you think that with Hex now, obviously we got these catalysts coming up. We got testnet v3, we got mainnet announcement, and then what happens past that? Are you thinking that this hype cycle is going to be an exciting one? Are you thinking that it's going to kind of roll up incrementally, and then I'm definitely interested to get your take. I've got mine, and I'm pretty bullish about this whole thing.
Yeah, no, I need to get my crystal ball out for this one, but
I know, right?
Let me see. I've kind of been saying similar stuff to what some other Hex OGs are saying, and it's that I know for a fact nothing. I don't know anything for a fact. Scratch that. Anybody telling you they know anything at all is full of shit. So I don't know, but I strongly think that the U.S. Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, I think he's going to raise rates 2 more times. It's going to be later in the later half of this year, which is going to put a damper on cryptocurrency prices. Now, is it going to send everything to all-time lows? Maybe Bitcoin. Hex, I don't think so. But can Hex go back to 3 cents one more time? Yes, it can. Is it going to happen anytime soon? I don't know. Maybe it'll be May, June, July. Keep an eye out for those rate hikes, because Powell's been pretty clear about, we're not done yet. We need to tighten a little more because we don't want runaway inflation. And hey, I kind of agree. I think he kind of maybe should have tightened earlier, but a little faster, right? But he's he's holding the course. I mean, he's holding steady, and he's not wavering on. He's not giving into political pressure. That's one thing I actually do kind of respect about him. He's just doing whatever he thinks is best, and it's like no one man should have all the power. Kanye West, blah blah blah. But nobody knows how to save the economy, right? So there's really just a group of old dudes at the end of the day, all around a circular mahogany table, trying to figure out which model is going to be the one that saves the world, the global reserve currency. And it's a job that nobody should really have, right? We should be trusting math, not man. That's why if we just program the inflation rate into our currency, it's a lot better than saying, oh, there's a war, let's print $1 trillion. Because then you get all these private interests that just fuck everything up. What was I saying? The price, right? So we're not going to see all-time highs, in my opinion, in 2023, but testnet v3 and PulseChain launch are probably going to pump the shit out of Hex. And we could easily see when PulseChain testnet comes out, I'm thinking like 10 to maybe 11, 12 cents. Just a guess. And then when the actual PulseChain launches, I think we could see Hex anywhere between 25 and 50 cents. But I really don't think we break all-time highs. I think we get pretty high, and then we crash back down. And I think we're kind of range bound for all of 2024, because I predict that that'll be the year that the housing market starts to crash and that equities start to really suffer. And then maybe people are actually feeling the effects of a recession, because right now there's still a ton of jobs. There's still all these jobs, all this kind of false alarm in the media, like this hysteria that's not quite arrived yet.
There always seems to be a delayed reaction to this stuff too. I mean, we saw what happened with, if you've watched the Big Short, that movie where it kind of, puts in digestible terms what happened with the housing market crashing. That took a long time to come to fruition, because we were almost running on fumes for a while, not really realizing that our legs have been cut from under us. But
exactly. And it's going to take some time for the effects of the quantitative tightening to trickle into the economy, right? That's just like you said, a lag. We're on a lag time. So 2024 might not be the best year, but it might continue to be an accumulation year for Hex. Whether we're range bound between 10 cents and 30 cents, I don't know. I think we'll be well off the floor, just because we'll have PulseChain out, and that'll keep us off the all-time lows for a while, just all that hype. And there's going to be a bunch of ratio trading games and debauchery going on in PulseChain. And then when the dust settles, and when the boomer stonks are ready to go back up again, I think that's when Hex and PulseChain all just absolutely rip for 2025, maybe even 26 a little bit. And that's kind of our cycle. But it's going to be a weird cycle where I don't think it's just as simple as like parabola slowly up. I think we got like a fake out, a range bound, and then maybe it might look a bit like the 2013 Bitcoin cycle, right? Where we pumped and settled. And
Do you think that we'll see that Hex high, the next all-time high on eHex or PHEX?
That's an interesting question. Yeah. So
I mean, there's no way of really.
Yeah. Well, I'm more curious about what you think, but I'll tell people what I've been saying is that I do think there's going to be a discrepancy in the price of eHex and PHEX. I think that people are going to value PHEX as quote unquote the real Hex, and eHex is obviously still going to have a price. People are still going to trade it, but it might be, a 10-to-1 ratio, for example. And once the liquidity is locked and there's high liquidity in the eHex PHEX pair over on PulseChain, I think the price movements can go up and down together. For example, if PHEX goes up 5%, eHex goes up 5%. But I think the US dollar price of the two, there's a good possibility that it's just different. And I believe PHEX might be more expensive. Now, there's other people saying that, they're going to, because of the liquidity bonding, the prices themselves are going to be bonded. I don't know.
So many ways to look at this, right?
I don't know. We've never seen this before. But what do you think?
I mean, starting, I guess, with price performance over Hex, I'm on the same page with you. I'm pretty bullish in regard to what's happening during this. I'm going to use the word hype cycle, because it is, right. And I think that we have some pretty big catalysts coming out, and whether we hit that all-time high as that happens, I'm not going to say that I think we'll do it. I do think that I wouldn't be surprised if it did, given how quickly price can move. I don't know if it'll be as long-lived as a lot of us would like, but I agree with you. I think that, when we get that, we'll get the 10 to 12 probably as testnets announced. And as we get to that PulseChain launch area, maybe between, 20, 30, 40, I think that's very, very doable. In terms of the high afterwards, it's such an interesting dynamic, because we haven't really seen anything to this scale before. So it's hard to pull any kind of data points from the past, but I think that I'm one of the believers. I think that parity has a pretty quick route to happening, just because of that liquidity bonding that you mentioned. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we do see people kind of, having a bit of that shiny new object mentality with Hex, right, which will pump it a little bit faster. So I have a vision of that kind of coming into play a lot sooner than a lot of us would think. So not just parity, but it kind of maybe pushing on early doors. And I'm talking the first, months where we see that kind of influx of energy. And then after that point, I don't know. And I keep telling people too that, folks who are worried about maybe Hex dying a death, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's not even favorable to happen, right? And I think that Ethereum is the most powerful chain around, and it's probably going to be for a while. And so therefore that in itself is maintaining a certain level of value with Hex. And as we start getting that structural adjustments happening with Ethereum, and we start seeing a faster, cheaper experience there. Well, we have two assets that are on pretty good chains then at that point. So I think that in terms of hedging alone, right? In terms of using a really good asset with some really good tokenomics and a fantastic community and idea behind it, well, why wouldn't people want to have two chains going at once? Because, Ethereum's already tried and proved. Hopefully we're anticipating PulseChain being, a very similar story in terms of adoption and certainly within the community. So it's and there's so many variables that it's almost, and you hear people kind of giving a multitude of that, what their opinion is on what's going to happen, and because there's so many options available to us. But I think more of these options are certainly leaning to positive ends for people who are not emotion trading, right? People who are not kind of looking to take advantage of every little nook and cranny. If you have a bit more of a simplified mindset about this, if you're staked and you're getting your copies, I don't see a bad situation playing out if you were to just keep your copies and keep your Hex and kind of maintain that throughout the whole journey. I think if anything, that's almost more of a guaranteed, path to success, because you're not missing out on anything. And there's probably, in terms of risk to reward ratio, I think it's in your favor. I also think that, we could potentially see an explosion on both chains when the bull market comes back around. So I'm playing it that way. I don't think I'm going to look to get out of any quick, easy trades. And again, that comes with that delayed gratification idea. We say it all the time. But you're actually seeing that happen when your emotions and your adrenaline's going, and you're seeing prices go up, and you're liquid, so you're not staked and you're not forced. It's a tough thing to do, and I've seen people, really kind of let price run away from them, or think they're taking advantage and pulling profits at the right time, only to find out that it wasn't the right time. And if they kept it a little longer, it would have been a whole different situation. And I've seen that too many times now. That
everyone's trying to time the market. Everyone gets upset when they don't catch the absolute top or the absolute bottom. And it just comes down to short-term thinking. And, the paradox of wealth creation is that you need to behave like a whale, but most people can't afford to behave like a whale, because when you're poor, when you're broke, you need the money right away. So you think money is scarce. When money is abundant for you, it allows you the mental fortitude to take these slower decisions and be like, all right, I'm going to wait till it hits my price target. And then I'm going to, just dollar cost average, put in, $1 million at the low. The whales are able to scoop up the dips because they don't need the money right now. And so I try to say, think like a whale, right? But it's easier said than done.
Sure. And you're right, though. I mean, one of the biggest kind of awakenings for me was, at various points, really seeing how much money there is in the world. Like, people, when you're poor, and I'm going to use the word poor for anyone not earning millions of dollars, right? Because that's essentially what it is. You're not anywhere near as rich as those people, as wealthy as those people. But it's funny when people, do we think, we have the whole argument about, or the whole notion that seems to be difficult to grasp about, market cap being, a factor in things, and is there enough money in the space, and is there, can it possibly do 1,000x? And it's like, you understand how much money there is in this world? There are people making hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that live a completely different existence to all of us. That you're just not, you're not surrounded by that day in, day out. So it's very difficult to grasp just the price movements that are possible. It's very difficult to grasp what actually holding true to your fundamental initial research and belief can achieve. And it's those people who have played this game time in and time out. I've seen it with traders too. And even, crypto is a better facilitator of fast wealth, let's say, right? We always talk about, a lot of channels talk about that mentality you get into if someone makes money quick, and it's almost like you go into this weird frame of mind. And I can only imagine, some of the people who were early into Hex, who saw some of that explosion just, recently.
Yeah.
And
well, myself included, if to a degree, we're all not ready for it. You know, when it happens as quickly as it can happen in crypto, you know, I'm not gonna lie, I've made some mistakes, you know, with the money, the little that I did have, relative to, you know, being a whale. People must think I'm like some huge whale. I'm not a small fish, right? But I'm definitely not a small fish. But like, even just for a young single guy to experience that level of wealth generation, you're gonna make some mistakes. You know, I won't go into it too much, but like, it's a shock to the system, and so a lot of people think that also when they get it that they have to spend it right away, because in the back of their mind, well, they're like, well, this isn't going to last long, you know. And you know, I wasn't as dumb as other people, but you know, there's a learning curve to it, right? To this whole being rich thing.
There absolutely is. And the best thing is when you're kind of plotting a course forward and the next cycle's coming up, you know how to play it now, right? I'm in a
Yeah,
similar boat myself. You know, I've made mistakes as well. I think one thing I learned pretty early on, which has served me well outside of crypto really, is the power of, you know, and it sounds obvious, but the power of investment. You know, I do some real estate. I do, you know, I own various businesses that over the years I've really busted my ass to like try to make these things happen to provide residual income. And then you know, I think you see, you know, folks that I know who have made an absolute fortune very, very quickly with like a fraction of like the time. And it's motivating to see, but it's also motivating to see some of those people who already had some of those skills initially too. So they've been realizing their profits from the last bull cycle in such exciting ways that there's a way to enjoy it, and there's also a way to when you are actually putting funds, when you are realizing some of the gains that you've made, there is exciting and really cool ways to invest that, so that when you do want to buy your Lamborghini, you're not reaching into your pot of money and buying one. It's coming through a residual vehicle, right? You know, it's a couple of rental homes, it's a business you bought, it's
yeah.
something that is
A lot of times,
perpetuating.
yeah, if you're the type of person that wants to buy a Lamborghini, for the most part, you're probably not going to make it. Like, no offense, but like,
I think that's number
unless
one.
you, what they say is
Yeah,
like, if you can't buy the car like 10 times and over, then you really shouldn't buy the car in the first place, right? I mean,
yeah.
and I think even more than that. Like, before I would even consider buying a Lambo, I'd have to have, you know, 8, 9 digit millions. Like, also, why would I want to drive a Lambo around in a place with a bunch of potholes, right? Like, you can't ever max it out. I'm not like, maybe I'll go to the racetrack every now and then and experience what a Lambo is like, but I mean, the upkeep, the maintenance, I got to get another garage in my house, like all this kind of shit that you just don't think about, that when you actually are wealthy, you're like, what is the cost of owning these things too?
You know, operating costs of your life seem to go up dramatically. I do
Yeah, like a
agree.
boat, right? They say the best days of boat ownership are the day you buy it and the day you sell it. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I
a
mean, do you have
fractured
any
boat.
experience with that? Like,
No, I don't. I haven't never bought a boat. I do have friends that have, and yeah, I think the mentality and something we did a while ago. A couple of partners I have in one of the ventures I'm into, we at one point decided to all kind of go in on a boat, and
yeah,
that was literally only because another friend of ours had a dock. And again, I understand that, you know, it's having a group like that in an area where you can actually ride a boat. It's a very lucky situation to be in.
makes more
But
sense.
yeah, even then, when you're sharing it, when it's docked somewhere where you don't actually have to pay for its docking fee and all of that stuff, it was still an inconvenience. Like, how often are you going to use a boat? I like the ocean, but
Yeah,
I don't know if I want to be there every day. And really, you know, so it was you. I think you have to. In my opinion, I think you have to be very, very comfortable to firstly have that not be a stress on your life. Otherwise, you know, owning that boat, I think the satisfaction you get from owning it, unless you're a kind of captain of a pirate ship in your past life, is way outweighed by the stress and the anxiety that comes with being able to afford it, and even
yeah,
time management. Yeah, and I've friends going through the same thing, and I've seen friends sell boats for those very same reasons. So
yeah,
yeah, totally agree with you.
yeah. It sounds cool, but yeah, reality is sometimes disappointing. We got a guy in the chat. He says, I need a Brita filter. I think that's well within your reach, sir. I think you'll be able to
Yeah.
afford one in this next cycle.
Yeah, it is really interesting, and it's, you know, I get excited talking about kind of you know, that sudden wealth syndrome conversation, because it's different when you hear it
Well,
from you know,
when did you first experience, like, did you get sudden wealth syndrome from your VC ventures, or is it more from crypto?
um relative to where I was at the time. I mean, I wasn't, you know, I wasn't exactly the most wealthy person in the world, but I think that I was very young, and so at that age, when you start earning, you know, a decent amount of money, it's and it's all relative. But yeah, I
Yeah,
did really. I mean, I wasn't the wisest. I think I was a little bit immature to start, you know, earning the money that I was earning. But what comes with that is the early lessons. I think that, you know, it's definitely helped me going forward since then to, I guess, just be more efficient and productive with the money that you have coming in. And also, I think an important thing too, and something that I learned pretty early on as well, was that the material good side of things is one half of like that perceived happiness equation. But the other side of that is experiences and forging, strengthening relationships and doing all that kind of stuff. And I think that when you don't have a lot of money, it's very easy to almost think of not even think of that as a good resource or a good place to allocate resources. But I've seen, and I'm getting a lot of satisfaction from traveling, from eating, at certain things, and group things, family things. You're able to help people, which has, and don't get me wrong, I'm not, I'm not where I certainly want to be. I don't want to give the impression to anyone listening that I'm a really wealthy person, but I think it's all relative to where you are in life. But I've seen firsthand people who I know who were doing well in life as well. But even then, they're doing very well. They made a lot of money through crypto very quickly, and it's the same thing. It doesn't matter, I think, if you're coming from a very, very what's the word, a modest kind of income straight to a ton of money through crypto, or whether you're earning a decent living and then still coming to money. It's still a shock to the system. And I think that it's always something to bear in mind, and it's just interesting that I've seen this play out firsthand. I was going to say that you hear people talking about this, and I probably wrote that off as well. I'd hear people talking about the various types of people who made money doing this and money doing that, and it's like when you first hear people having that awful CVID, that I don't want to say it. I don't know what the YouTube rules are.
I think we can say it now. I don't think
we can say it.
I don't think it's real anymore.
Okay, yeah. Well, people who are just in case, people who you hear about someone who had it, but then someone who's actually gone through it and the issues that they had, and whether whatever you believe in, or whatever your stance lies on that, probably gives you a little closer perspective on some of that stuff. And I think that seeing this firsthand too was a huge motivator for me starting my channel. I'm like, okay, well, now I have some firsthand experience with a couple of different elements here. I've seen people make a ton of money and all the exciting things they're doing. I'm gonna start talking about this and getting more involved in this ecosystem, because
dude, it's so much fun, man. Like, I don't know where else are people having the most fun, like, other than crypto. Like, what's going well in the world other than pretty much crypto? Like, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of
revolution. People say, I mean, it is a revolution. It's like the .com bubble. A lot of people missed out on
can
that
be
because
fun.
they didn't understand it.
Yeah, and it can be a lot of fun. You can meet a lot of interesting people. I mean, I think it's going to have more of a net positive effect on the world than any kind of political activism or anything like that, unless you're actually getting into politics. I mean, no offense to the people that held signs and went down and protested and stuff, but like protests are somewhat important if they're nonviolent, or if they're not instigated with conveniently placed pallets of bricks. But at the end of the day, I think if you really do fix the money and you give people the ability to have financial freedom, they're going to do a lot more good for the world than marching down the street and yelling about abortion or whatever the hot topic of the day is. I think it's all kind of distractions and sideshows to keep the people, basically just to keep the rat race going and to keep the the financial slavery of the general population.
You can say it, the Matrix.
The Matrix, yeah, that's what I was looking for.
Escape the Matrix.
yeah. Watch, that's gonna be like a new band word.
No Romanians are watching that.
Quiet, they're gonna bust on my door any second, dude.
Yeah, I completely agree, man. I mean, it's a lot of indoctrination, a lot of conditioning that crypto is trying to, crypto environment helps people remove themselves from. And I think whether, wherever you're starting from, percentage gain is a percentage gain. I mean, if you're taking, it is a leap of faith, and the bold are the ones that are reaping the rewards, and that's why I think
the real end game, I think, is when you can start spending this shit like everywhere, and when it becomes universal. Like, you can already spend it in certain places. You can go to Bitrefill or Shopping.io. You can spend your crypto on real stuff because other people will take it, and money is only as good as the other people that will accept it, that believe that it's also money. But it's happening right in front of our eyes, and there's certain companies that they're accepting crypto. And I think when you do, that's when it really becomes game over, because you can live your entire life outside of the traditional system. I think what's going to take the longest is probably like real estate, but you can't really pay your rent in crypto as far as I know. But maybe other countries are going to beat America, to the punch there.
I think, Dubai already are, Portugal already are. I think, there's big infrastructures out there now that pretty much buying anything. I mean, it started in Dubai and Portugal really with the luxury market, being able to buy a new Bugatti with your cryptocurrency.
I've heard about some crypto dudes moving over to Dubai. I don't know if I'm ready to make that leap, but Portugal sounds pretty nice. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's Portugal. Like, they're doing a big push now for and it's funny because I've done work with one of their tourism boards. And so a big push, not necessarily on crypto in general, but retirement. And whatever age you're in, they have a great standard of living, a good place to go, and they're implementing a lot of crypto tax breaks first and foremost. But the next step on that is to start really kind of developing the crypto infrastructure for spending, like Dubai have. It's easy when you're an Emirates country and you don't, the royal family kind of dictates, right? So they're in complete control. They know which ways the wind's blowing, and they don't get delayed by the same kind of process that the US would, for instance. So there's a reason why they're doing it a lot faster and a lot more productively than us. But it's
when they
inevitable.
own the asset that basically undermines the global reserve currency, when you realize that, like, it's not really the US dollar, it's the petrodollar, whether that's the petro yuan or the petrodollar, they set the rules. And I think what the US is scared of is it's a control thing at the end of the day. They don't want to lose control of the money. They want their three-letter agencies. Everyone wants to keep their jobs and keep things going. But then China's sneaking in the back door and denominating all the oil prices in yuan, or at least negotiating for it. And so there's a natural flow of things where currencies don't last forever either. Everything's on a life cycle of about 150 years, according to Ray Dalio. And if he's right, then the US dollar is not looking so good. But then we're kind of like we're scrambling in the US to hold power with our CBDCs. Same in the UK. Same in a lot of these English speaking nations. Australia. They just want to maintain the status quo when everything is clearly moving to crypto. And I think the Saudis are able to adapt just because they basically get the ability to say fuck you to everybody because they have all the oil, or.
Well, that's it. Yeah. And then it's almost like, I mean, you see countries like Venezuela who also owned all the oil, but kind of got dominated by the various other countries. And so they went through a stage, I think, of almost following in suit with, is it El Salvador that ended up.
El Salvador is actually, from what I understand, El Salvador is kind of like digging themselves out of their hole. And I think a lot of American propaganda tries to play what's happening in El Salvador off as a failure. But from what I hear, people are actually using Lightning Network. People are using Bitcoin and enjoying it, and people are buying it like crazy in countries like Brazil,
and so
Argentina,
many other countries. Exactly, yes.
Because they're finally able to get out of the slavery that the U.S. basically indoctrinated them with all these loans, right? Like Confessions of an Economic Hitman. The CIA and oil companies would go into these other small nations, developing nations, and they would lock them into these development contracts and say, hey, we're going to build you a power plant. We're going to build you all these roads and schools and hospitals. You just have to be in debt to us for the rest of your life. Basically, you just have to pay, agree to sign these loans where you're essentially repaying us for the entirety of your existence. And so the countries that are realizing that they can opt out are starting to opt out.
And that's great. And you're right. It seems to be matriculating through a lot of other countries too, mainly third world countries, I think, that don't have such an infrastructure. And so they've had to be creative, I think, for them. Individuals.
Africa too. From that's what I heard from Walrus. He says that they're probably going to be the fringe where there's the most crypto adoption in the next few years. Because think about it, they were using like cell phone minute points as their currency. They were literally using cell phone minutes as their currency.
It was a way as well. I mean, a lot of communities were using gaming tokens and things too.
Yeah,
which is unbelievable. But it goes to show just the necessity of this whole thing, right? It's like, this is the way the wind is blowing. I think we're unfortunately, and fortunately, we get to live in a place that is, has working structure and all of that stuff. But it is going to mean that we're kind of training a little bit when it comes to living in an area that facilitates a lot of this freedom. Let's call it. But yeah, man, there are countries out there that are taking this and kind of running with that ball. I just think it is going to take a little longer for most of us because we're still the minority. I think in crypto especially, we know it's growing. We know the community is growing, and certainly it's being adopted more and more and more. But you just got to go outside and start talking to people to realize just we are still the minority, and the government have done a good job of pushing their narrative, right? Whether it's depositioning El Salvador as a kind of failed experiment, or whether it's keep trying to indoctrinate us into their thinking to be kind of still part of the machine. It's going to take a generation or two, I think, to people coming out of the gates, out of the womb, like with a hard wallet, and really kind of becoming the norm. I think we're still in Boomerville right now when it comes to some of the institutions, which it offers opportunity too for us. I think right now, anyone talking about crypto, anyone listening to this stream, especially with Hex, PulseChain, PulseX, there is going to be a significant opportunity to make some real gains. And it's selfishly, it's great for us because we are, again, the minority, and this, before the sanctions come, before all of that stuff happens, we've got a couple of years to really make an impact.
We've at least got one, maybe two cycles. While we've been talking a lot about the government scrambling for control, but it's also just private corporations. The banks are all private. The Federal Reserve is a private corporation, believe it or not. Wake up, sheeple. But at the end of the day, by the time they think that they have control, the cards will have already been dealt. And by the time JP Morgan feels okay about crypto, you're not going to hear Jamie Dimon saying that crypto is good until they already feel comfortable themselves that they've established enough of a position in it that they're the ones selling it to you now. And by that time, sorry guys, all the gains are gone. But until then, we can kind of take advantage of just the chaos.
What is your take on, and this is an interesting topic too, because I know that obviously Hex in the grand scheme of things isn't like a tenured crypto yet, and it's seen through a certain lens. When PulseChain, PulseX are launched, come to fruition, what is your take on institutional money coming into that ecosystem? Because obviously they couldn't have got involved in any of the sacrifice. It's just not palatable.
Yeah.
Maybe they're doing it individually, but on behalf of an entity, it's not something that's easily write-offable as a leap of faith.
Are you talking about like specifically PulseChain or everything?
Well, PulseChain, PulseX ecosystem, I guess, but maybe crypto in general as well. But I know that the floodgates are kind of opening a little bit on that front anyway. Right?
Yeah. So it's gonna be VCs first, right? And it's gonna be this new wave of VCs like we see encroaching into Ethereum right now. Like Bitcoin is so old that the institutions already got it, right? They're finally wrapping their head around what Bitcoin is, and there's a lot of people that they'll tell you like, oh, Bitcoin's great, but we're not so sure about everything else. That's because they own a bunch of Bitcoin now. So people beg and plead for these institutions to pump their bags as if they're the only ones that are able to do it. It's like the people can actually rise above that. You don't need institutional money to get rich in crypto. The only reason the Bitcoiners are begging for it from people like Saylor and, they're so giddy now when like a big bank starts to get their hands into crypto. It's like they've lost the plot completely, that it was never about the banks in the first place. This is starting to happen to Ethereum in a slightly different way with more of like venture capitalists, right? Or vulture capitalists.
Like Raoul Paul talks a lot about kind of, taking his ventures into heavily. I mean, it's pretty much all crypto now. And
yeah.
I think he's a good example of a VC with an open mind, basically.
Yeah. I like the guy. He's cool. But you've got like A16Z and Sequoia Capital and all these different VC firms that are kind of going to be almost like the new institutional players that were able to take the risk, just like Kraken and Coinbase are just the new banks, right? They took risks and they established themselves. These new players are eventually going to come into PulseChain when they find it safe enough, right? But people that deal with multiple millions of dollars to invest, they need years of time before they make a decision. They're not going to, even though a VC will react faster than an institution, they're still going to require probably a minimum like 3 to 5 years for PulseChain to establish itself to be like, okay, this stuff isn't going to crash. Now we're ready. But that's all opportunity. That's all opportunity.
It definitely is. It's initial opportunity that isn't cannibalizing itself out of the gates with everyone getting in at once. It's enforcing longevity in the project cycle because we know the community. I mean, we're pretty confident.
We know it's not going anywhere.
Exactly. And I think you're right. I think that snowball effect can actually take form a lot more as soon as a couple of years go by. Again, they start viewing PulseChain as an actual, something that has a bit of tenure in the market and has gained that gravitas even more so because it's now compared to an Ethereum or even a Cardano or, some of the guys that have been around for a while. I think you're right. I think that it's exciting because we've all learned to delay our mindset, at least. I'm not saying all of our gratification because there's going to be plenty of opportunities, over the next couple of cycles to take some real big profits. But I think the community itself, having learned to be disciplined and having a different mindset, thanks to Richard Hart, in the most part, his ethos has really been one that has driven home, more of an investor mentality to people who don't necessarily have experience with that, which sounds obvious to many of us, but it's people hearing you for the first time.
People coming in crypto and they like, you tell the average guy on the street that you're in crypto, like, oh, so you're like day trading, right? They think that's what crypto is. It's like, oh, so you're a trader. It's like, no, I'm the exact opposite of that. But
which is what I love about your channel too, because you've historically not jumped on every single moon coin that's come out, and people do it because it's kind of a responsibility almost as like a YouTuber. I take it where
it's a responsibility to my viewers, but it's also a responsibility to myself. I don't want to get wrecked, and I'm learning things just as well as you guys are. Yes, I have sacrificed or invested. Let's just say invested in probably 5 or 6 other projects that are coming to PulseChain or tangential to PulseChain. But I need to be very selective, because just if I get wrecked, then 30,000 subscribers get wrecked. But I mean, I care about everybody equally, but I care about me at the end of the day, at the top of the list. And so you guys should know that just by my own volition of not wanting to get wrecked myself, like I'm going to try to make some wiser decisions and not just ape into the next shiny object that comes along.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I think that's why your channel's so popular, because it's easy to see, and that's definitely something, as me as a newer YouTuber, trying to emulate that as much as possible, because I'm the same way. I think that when it comes to this space in general, I mean, look, it takes a fair amount of research, due diligence. It takes really a simplified approach in terms of like how you allocate your portfolio. You don't.
Yeah.
There are plenty of people out there suggesting to make very quick moves and trades. For most people out there, that's not how they're going to make that money. They don't have enough money for that to be profitable for them, because you're going to take some losses along the way. If you're starting at a pretty modest place like most are, then you've got to be pretty exacting with where you're putting it, and you've got to be confident and almost be an all in on like a couple of these projects, because ultimately you believe in them, you're confident in them, but you want to have enough skin in the game for it to make an impact on you too. And if you're spread out too thin with 1,000,001 different tiny projects that half of them fail, it's not the way.
Yeah. And so question for you, kind of as a traditional investor in lots of early stage startups, in your VC days or whatever, what criteria do you look for, and how can that be applied to the average crypto investor that might be watching?
Yeah, and there are a lot of synergies between the two. And as I was saying before, I guess once you get past revenue, right? I mean, look, we can all do a technical analysis on a crypto, for instance, or a company. Hindsight is easy. You just look back and see what happened, right? This is a lot of people focus on that too. It's like, well, the price did this, and then it went down, and we can try to correlate what's going to happen. Fine. But I think what a lot of people don't understand about the venture world so much is that it's not rocket science once you get past that TA. Yes, we have analysts. Same within the stock world, right? When you're trading, you have a team of technical analysts and bringing you all variations of how deep they go into that well. Essentially, when you can take more of a macro lens about some of this stuff too, and look at some of the non-direct financial indicators. So if a project is brand new, like a PulseChain, for instance, right, or a PulseX, well, we can do a TA on Hex, and we can see kind of price performance there, which all points in a solid direction. But then when you look at some of those peripheral selling points, the same rules apply to a company as it does to a crypto project or a token. I think that when you're looking at the potential for a brand footprint to expand, which comes down to ultimately any existing community and the buy-in that they have, something that a Hex has by the spades, because we have a very passionate community of people who really believe in the product to the point where they're actually outwardly marketing it, right? So you think, okay, well, this is something we can build from. If they don't have that, does it have the tools to create this? Because that marketing is everything. And you learned this too, even with my public relations firm, right? It's a case of you can have the best tech in the world, and yes, that plays a role, and there are ways to position those selling points to certain audiences. But ultimately, it's how all of these selling points, the messaging, the community, how you're wrapping that in a way that you can best position to your own following and then potential followers. So it's a lot of variables. It's not the most rocket science approach, because there are a lot of peripheral thoughts and a peripheral kind of selling points that go into this algorithm, right, in terms of what is a good investment and what isn't. And I think that one of the biggest factors after community, after you take a temperature read and audit of what that footprint actually looks like, you just got to look forward to see how much that can expand. And I think that it's easier to do in an industry that's been around for a while. You take the tech industry, where a lot of my focus was, the software industry. They're all compartmentalized really into sectors. Some of them are newer, but you have the luxury of being able to look at that market over the long haul, right? And see, even if it's a brand new innovator, you've got a blueprint to how the route to success should be. We know the kinds of audiences they're going to be, interested in this. We know, a lot of big brands that are trusted. You don't have the risk of, any of the scam mentality. You don't have the risk of it being not trusted. These are, institutions of the country. Some of these companies, the Sonys of the world, the Toshibas, or even the Facebooks. There's a blueprint for a lot of this. With crypto, it's a little harder to go down those rabbit holes because, you can't do a specific market analysis because, so many of these projects are brand new, like a Hex. There's really nothing like it. I think that, while we do have Bitcoin, Ethereum, and some of the long, again, those long tenured cryptocurrencies to kind of pick out what we like and what we don't like, that's about as far as that goes. So ultimately, again, it all comes down to community. And I think that, one of the things that drew, and it's a long way of saying that ultimately there's so many things you can cross off the list, but without having the same trust factors that you have with other industries that have been around and are generally more accepted, we know that you're playing to a certain type of crowd. You're playing to the crypto crowd. And, that's a growing crowd. And I think the selling points and the audiences, the demographics are changing all the time and being more and more inclusive. But I think that, you have to build out from a community. I think Richard Hart's done that very, very well. So now when I'm vetting new projects, I mean, and we know coming down the pike, there is still a lot of innovation that we'll no doubt see. We have AI, we have, all things kind of metaverse, two big buzzwords right now with, a lot of institutional awareness, let's say, a lot of the tech companies getting in directly into that type of stuff, which indirectly plays into crypto because they want to have tokenized economics, much the same as Xbox do with some of their gaming tokens and things. So I think that we'll no doubt see a lot of these spaces opening up over the next couple of years and into this bull cycle. How quickly they come, I guess we'll see. But I think that my vetting process right now, until we start getting an idea of what those new areas look like, those new sectors of crypto, I think that it's going to come down to assessing the initial buy-in to any new products. So, who are they trying to replicate? What audiences are they playing into right now? For instance, if something's launching on a PulseChain and it seems to hold all the same fundamental beliefs that a Richard Hart ecosystem believes, well, it's probably going to play to the same market, the same ecosystem. How much value is it bringing? And then once you've kind of crossed those borders, you then start looking into the executive team, right? What their background is. You start justifying and building that trust factor when it comes to who's actually behind it. What are their motivations going to be? Which again is a little more difficult to do when you don't have necessarily a huge LinkedIn profile to glean from, a resume of trusted companies that we're all aware of that they've worked for, and they've referrals and whatnot. It's a different ball game, right? A lot of these guys are fresh out of the developer studio, and they're putting something together without much knowledge in any other field. So you've kind of got to take the value points that you can and just try to use your own common sense. It's a very convoluted way of answering that question.
Yeah.
And it's probably worth maybe doing another video at some point where it's maybe I can iterate a little clearer kind of the path that I would go down.
I think that'd be a good, 10-minute pre-recorded video. Everyone's looking for a guideline and a framework, and what better person than yourself, who's actually been an investor for I don't know how many years, but I know you've got some experience, right? So obviously, community.
Well, and I can bring some context. I was in out of San Francisco for about 8 years, specifically doing VC stuff, and then since then, I'm not full time in it, but once you still have the same connections, you're still looking for the same opportunities. Let's say it's always good to keep your ear to the grindstone and see what kind of new innovations coming out, and I have the benefit too of obviously being experienced myself, but people who are still in that space being a lot more relevant than I are able to kind of give me the cliff notes on some of that stuff too, which same mentality, just saves me the time of having to go out and really try to do that due diligence myself.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome, dude. You've got a lot of street cred as far as it goes, more so than everybody else, myself included. Like I'm playing VC for the first time because I'm finally able to. I can afford to. But you do have to really treat it like a VC role. Being a personal investor, you should almost act like you have your own VC firm. The lucky thing for you is that all you've got is yourself to disappoint. You don't actually have the stress.
It's great, yeah. And I think even though you don't necessarily come from a VC background or anything like that, I think that this is a perfect vehicle to learn very quickly, right? I mean, you've become an educator in this space because you understand it, because
I've worked in finance. I worked for 2 years in finance and 5 years in tech. And so the blend of seeing everything together.
You have a pretty good pedigree as well.
Crypto is the perfect, the perfect next step for me, to be honest. It's just it's an amalgamation of everything I've ever learned. So I hope I can add some value, but yeah, guys, we're at almost an hour and a half. Ben, do you want to, Yeah. Do you want to wrap up or have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good for now. This is my first stream, man, and I'm happy to have done it with you.
You
And
did
I
great.
definitely appreciate your help. Thank you very much.
Guys,
And
we've got
everyone,
150 people
pleasure.
watching. What are you doing? Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Takes 2 seconds. Let's get those numbers up, guys. Ben Cage, it looks like you've got 20 subs. Let's see if we can get that to 1.75K by the end of the stream.
That'll be fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's an absolute pleasure, and I love hearing the thoughts of people who seem to be on the same page. And it's a page that takes a little journey to get to, really. And you've probably seen it yourself. A lot of guys, a lot of people out there asking what we would deem to be pretty early entry questions. But it goes to show just how many new people are coming into the space and wanting to learn. And I'll say that maybe a good thing to leave people with in terms of message and some of the intimidation factor that comes with crypto and understanding it. There's a lot to get your head around. I know people in finance who have been in finance for years and years and years, and they are equally, out of the loop as someone coming fresh, from their paper route. So, don't feel intimidated. Everyone's got to start somewhere, and asking and learning. So easy nowadays with people out there like us who are doing our best to bring our 2 cents to the table. And so, yeah, that's something that everyone should take away.
Yeah. Awesome. Guys, like and sub Ben Cage.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. It's been awesome, and coffee, a pleasure, my friend.
Thanks for having me on, dude.
Yeah, no, absolutely, anytime. And hopefully I get to speak to you soon.
Yep. Later.
Thank you, man.